Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to head over to America once again, and we're going to go to another brewery that I've never tried anything from before. So these guys are a really interesting brewery. They're from a city that's very, very well known for its craft beer. In fact, many people would describe this place as being a mecca of craft beer, and you could probably consider it as well as being one of the kind of birthplaces of the whole American craft beer movement. But this brewery are one of the kind of new boys on the block. They've built a very good reputation for themselves, though they've got quite a pedigree, to be honest with you too. And they're one of the smaller by volume producers as well. And this was a can that I kind of came across quite randomly here in Hong Kong. I'd never heard of the brewery, and I just kind of thought, well, let's do it and see what it's like, because it's a style that I very much enjoy. So needless to say, I'm really curious to see what this one's going to have in store for us. Hopefully it's another good beer. Hopefully it makes for an interesting review. And as always, I hope that you guys watching enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to head to the west coast of the US. We're going to go to the state of California, and to be specific, we're going to go to San Diego in the very south of the state and the North Park district. And that means that we're going to have a look at my very first beer from North Park Beer Company. So this particular beer is called Triple Foo. It comes in at 10.5% ABV. And this one is a West Coast Imperial Triple, whatever you want to call it, IPA. Now, this is a beer that I picked up at Gur Beer in the One Mall in Tsim Sha Tsui here in Hong Kong. And like I say, this brewery is a very small production in comparison with some of the others in that San Diego area. So to find one of their cans over here in Hong Kong, of all places, is quite random, and this one literally caught my eye because I hadn't heard of the brewery before, and the fact that it's a West Coast triple IPA. So yeah, a style that I very, very much enjoy. I wish there were more West Coast IPAs on the market these days. You know, the haze craze is still kind of in full swing, I guess we could say. But yeah, I was just very, very curious to try this one, a California brewery that I'd never heard of before. But yeah, let's crack on with this one then and see how we get on. The Triple Foo 10.5% ABV West Coast Triple IPA from North Park Beer Company in San Diego, California. So, as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting though, just fast forward. All the usual links can be found in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my future reviews that hopefully I can do from North Park Beer Company. This is the very first time I'm trying one of their beers, as I've mentioned, but hopefully not the last, and I do hope I can get out to San Diego at some point in the next couple of years and take a look. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support that you give is massively appreciated. And remember, you can go into the channel homepage and search for beer using the geography tagging system. So just go in there, use the little search bar, put in your hometown, state, county, province, whatever you like. If I've reviewed beers from the area that you search for, they will pop up. Failing that, you can check out the playlist of beers from different countries. You'll find this one in the American playlist, along with a number of other things. That's being added to quite regularly at the moment because there are quite a few random American beers making their way over here to Hong Kong, and I'm very curious to try them, so I do. But you can check out the playlist of beers from other countries as well, and there are some very, very interesting things on the channel these days too, so do make sure you check those out. But let's go on to my brewery notes then, and I'll tell you a little bit about North Park Beer Company for the first time. So North Park Beer Company, as I've mentioned to you already, are based in the North Park area of San Diego in California on the American West Coast, and the company was founded back in 2016, and the main man behind it is Kelsey McNair. So Kelsey has a background in game design and moved to California to work in that field, and he soon fell in love with North Park, which is known as being a bit of a beer haven. There's lots of breweries based there, lots of kind of beer-centric restaurants, and just craft beer bars and stuff like this. But he had also been a long-time home brewer. He started home brewing back in 2004 and operated out of his garage. And at this point, he already had the name North Park Beer Company, and his Hop Fu IPA became one of the most highly decorated homebrews in the US, and it was also in the IPA category, which is very, very difficult to get recognition in because of how popular it is. So Kelsey had a ridiculously good reputation as a home brewer, and that of course served as the base for making his own brewery. So after garnering this kind of massive recognition as a home brewer, Kelsey, along with his wife Amanda, started to focus on taking their love of beer to the commercial stage. So over the year, they battled to raise capital and fund the brewery, and they eventually opened their doors to the public in June of 2016. The premises that they have is a large space on University Avenue, and it was formerly home to a kickboxing gym called Untappd. But they've got an on-site tap room and kitchen there, with the brewery on one side of the seating space and the bar on the other. And this brewery is still a relatively small operation, and apparently in 2022 they produced 2,600 US barrels of beer. So this translates roughly to 415,000 litres. And like I say, if you think about the size of the California beer scene, 415,000 litres in 1 year is not a lot at all. But in June of 2022, they announced that they would open a second tap room in Bankers Hill, which has a 2,000 square foot floor space, and this opened a few months later, and that boasts 24 taps. So it actually has more taps than the original tap room, which if I remember correctly was 18. But as of March 2024, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced 416 different kinds of beer according to Untappd. There's a wide variety of styles in there. When I was looking at what was on at the brewery tap room, they had what they were calling a Scottish amber called McNair's, obviously after the founders. So yeah, they do a variety of different styles, but obviously this is the one that caught my eye out of the beers that we had here in Hong Kong, because it's a West Coast triple IPA, and I love the big West Coast doubles. But yeah, that is everything I can really tell you about North Park Brewing Company for the moment. There wasn't too much information available on these guys, but if you want to learn more, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. But yeah, let's go on and have a little look at the beer itself. So yeah, this one, as you can see, is another one of these 473 milliliter cans, 1 American pint or 16 fluid ounces if you want to use the freedom scale or freedom units, as I kind of always say with the American things. The American measurement system makes no sense to me. But there you can see North Park Beer Company. I'm having to tilt that. I do need to get another stand for my phone for filming here in Hong Kong. But there you can see Triple Fu, and it tells you at the bottom here, triple dry hopped West Coast triple IPA, 10.5% ABV. So the hops in this one are Chinook, Simcoe, Citra, Mosaic, Amarillo, Columbus Cryo and Strata. We know all of these hops quite well. All of them are American. Chinook is about 12% alpha acid. It's known for its big kind of piney resinous character. Simcoe is 12% alpha acid, usually quite an oily passion fruit is what you're going to get out of it in a West Coast IPA. Citra, one of your classic sea hops, 14% alpha acid, big juicy mangoes, capable of like a stronger grapefruit as well, and also a bit of lemon limey character, and also some gooseberry lychee in a West Coast IPA. Mosaic, 14% alpha acid, juicy tangerines and that little bit of earthy character in its green component. Amarillo is 12% alpha acid, big, oily, zesty orangey characters. Columbus is really known for having that big, spicy, floral type note to it. And then Strata is a newer hop in comparison with the others. It can be like 14 to 16% alpha acid, and it has a wee bit of a kind of gooseberry and strawberry type note to it as well. So I'll just let you have a little quick look at the wee thing on the side there. But yeah, like I say, 10.5% West Coast triple IPA. And yeah, I think they just needed a fourth one on there, like a blue one, and then they would have had the, like almost the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Maybe they have got a quadruple foo, who knows. But yeah, let's get this guy out into the glass and see how we get on. I'm really curious about this, because I love the Imperial West Coasters, and this one should be quite interesting. I've heard very good things about this brewery. And I think to try this one outside of California is very, very rare. And I think the can is fairly fresh as well, actually. This has been imported into Hong Kong on a very, very small scale. But you can see the head pretty much disappeared right away with this one, which is kind of to be expected. So remember, one of the key differences between a West Coast IPA and a New England is that West Coast IPAs are pretty much done with near enough all barley malt, whereas New Englands use a bit of oat and wheat, so they might retain their head a little bit better than the West Coasters might. But you can see the head pretty much faded away very, very quickly there. It just had about a quarter finger of a frothy kind of cream coloured bumpy head. So yeah, appearance wise, you can see this beer, if I shine the light through it, it's a kind of pale golden straw sort of colour, this one. So remember, the colour of your beer depends on a few things. One, the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. Two, length of your wort boil is also going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugar is caramelised, and thus you get a darker colour of beer. But any barrel aging that you do or adjuncts you put into the beer will affect its colour as well. But when it comes to IPAs, you don't often have to care about that. So yeah, just keep that in mind. But just going by the colour of this one, I have an idea about this, because for me, West Coast IPAs can lean two ways. They can be a bit more oily and caramelly, such as the Sierra Nevada Torpedo, or they can be a bit more kind of biscuity and bready, such as the Pliny the Elder from Russian River. Just going by the colour of this one and the fact that it's a bit more of a kind of yellow straw colour rather than being more like blood orange copper type thing, I think this is going to be a more kind of bready, biscuity type of fare rather than anything else. But yeah, not too much in the way of visible carbonation with this one. Like I say, I know the can is pretty fresh. Just one or two little bubbles sticking toward the bottom of the glass there. The head, you can see, disappeared quite quickly, and you can see the beer is pretty transparent if I just put my hand behind it like that. So after that, I don't think there's anything we really need to say about the appearance of this one. So let's move on to the aroma section then and see what this beer is going to have in store for us. Oh yeah, yeah, there's just something about smelling these beers, these West Coast IPAs, that's just so nostalgic. I mean, I got into the kind of, I got into beer through the German Rauch beers and Doppelbocks, the more malty side of things, the Scotch ales of course as well. But my first exposure to kind of American style craft beer probably was with Brewdog, and in that case it was the original Punk IPA and also the Hardcore IPA. And smelling things like this just remind me of Hardcore IPA, which was lovely. You can still get it as Mr. President at home in Tesco's and things. But yeah, smelling something like this is proper old school. But I would say this beer, I'm curious as to how bitter this one is going to be, because there are many West Coast IPAs these days that have dialed back their IBU count a little bit, and the main reason for that is that many new drinkers of IPAs don't like the big 80, 90 IBU bitterness that you used to get from the West Coast IPAs. Many people have started drinking the hazy IPAs, then when they go to try the West Coast IPA and see how bitter it is, they don't like it. So a number of breweries have dialed that back a bit in recent times. This one, just going by the aroma, smells like it could be a more modern take on the West Coast IPA, because the green component just smells that little bit softer. But this aroma kind of gives you what you'd expect. You've got a bit of a sweeter malt base in there, like an oily sweet malt base, some nice kind of green component as well, and some lovely oily fruity characters. And if you know the hops that are in this beer, you'll see what I mean. This one delivers on what you'd expect. So let's have a wee look at the aroma and just describe it a bit more in depth for you. So on the on the malty side of things, you've got a lovely little bit of kind of fresh brown bready bread crust coming out of this one. So yeah, fresh brown bready bread crust in there. There's a little touch of woodiness. maybe a very slight crackery note to it. But yeah, I suspect this beer is using American two-row malts. And as I've said, in comparison to European malts, the American two-row is a bit sweeter and more oily than the German Crystal, for example, or even the English Maris Otter. But yeah, there's a sweet kind of oily brown bready character in there. There's a good little bit of white bready nature to it as well. Yeah, and just you've got this little bit of like cracker and wood underneath. As I said, West Coast IPAs tend to be pretty much all barley malt. Sometimes you get a bit of wheat, and I have seen one or two with a little bit of oat, but predominantly it is barley malt. So yeah, on top of the bread, you have this, on top of the bread, you start to get the sweeter side out of this beer. And this is the interesting thing about this one. This is a 10.5% triple IPA. 10% for me is usually when you go into triple territory, and then 12% is quadruple, 8% for me would be the double. But yeah, for this being so high in booze, it's actually got a very mild-mannered aroma, to be honest with you. So yeah, you've got the brown bread in there, you've got the white bread, and then you start to get the kind of brown sugary notes out of this. So you do have this kind of straight up sweet caramelly note to this one, and that's going to be quite heavily linked with the boozier side of this beer. But underneath that, you get a bit of McVitie's digestive biscuit, and you've got that sort of big oily biscuity character with this beer as well, which is quite interesting. So all of these things are kind of linked, together in a sense. So yeah, the way that kind of pieces together is quite nice in this one. So yeah, bit of straight up caramel, kind of oily McVitie's digestive biscuit, and then yeah, you've got that kind of sweeter, more grainy type of biscuit character as well. Yeah, I think the way that everything pieces together on the malty side of things with this beer is pretty much what you'd expect from the style. There's nothing really surprising about that. So yeah, I think that we can go on to the hoppy side of the beer. And one thing you have to remember with IPAs is that there are three types of hoppings. Early addition hopping, which takes place within the first hour of the wort boil, that gives you mainly bitterness and a deeper, danker aroma. You've got late addition hopping, which takes place within the last half hour of the wort boil. That gives you a brighter green component in terms of flavour and aroma, but it can give you a little touch of bitterness as well. And then you've got dry hopping, which takes place after the wort boil is complete, and that gives you, yeah, that gives you pretty much all flavour and aroma and a kind of brighter green component. So yeah, with this beer, as I say, the green component isn't too deep and dank. It's more, yeah, the green component in this one is actually really mild, to be honest with you. And I wonder if that's because they've used Columbus as a cryo hop in this one. And whenever you use cryo hops, you know, cryo hops essentially are, it's like an oil extraction, like a liquid extraction of the hop, and it's the useful part from the chemistry perspective. So whenever you add cryo hops into these beers, the green component always comes across as being very, very smooth and oily, whereas if you used Columbus pellets, it would be pretty much, you know, spicy and floral as fuck, to be honest with you. It would be like that. So yeah, the green component in this beer is incredibly smooth. There's a little bit of earthiness in there, which is probably going to come from the Columbus, maybe to a degree the Chinook, but the Mosaic's going to contribute to that as well. You've got a little bit of floral character in there, and you've got a fair little bit of grassiness too, but as I say, the cryo just makes the whole thing more oily, and because it has that oily character to it, it's not deep and dank in the way that you know, a traditional West Coast IPA would be. So I'm curious to see how all of this is going to translate into the flavour. I wonder if this is going to be a more modern West Coast IPA with lower bitterness, or whether it's going to be quite old school. Sometimes these beers can deceive you a little bit. But let's focus on the fruity side of things then. I think we've covered the green component and the technical aspects of the beer. On the fruity side of things, there's a few things going on. I mean, I think the strata is quite prominent in this one. I'm getting a lot of like the sort of gooseberry melon sort of thing it can give you, and also the kind of strawberry. So yeah, I'm getting a lot. Yeah, I'm getting a lot of the gooseberry melon and the strawberry type thing. I'm getting a good little bit of that kind of oily, passion fruity sort of thing out of this one, and that's the Citra and the yeah, it's the Citra and the Simcoe are going to give you that. So there's an oily passion fruit. There is a bit of that oily mango as well. Citra's going to contribute. I'm getting a bit of the kind of lychee, gooseberry sort of thing that Citra can give you in West Coast IPAs as well. I don't find, I mean, Amarillo and Mosaic, you would expect to give you a sort of orangey, tangerine component, but I don't find that is overly prominent in the aroma of this beer, to be honest with you. And that's quite interesting. Like, it's mainly the melon, gooseberry, lychee sort of thing from the Strata and the Citra at the front. And then, yeah, you've got that bit of tropical fruit in there, which is what you'd expect from the Citra and the Simcoe. That's quite interesting, actually. So as I always say, take a bit of time to just ponder over the aroma of your beer before you get stuck into it. But I think we should have a taste of this and see what it's all about. As you can see, the head on this one is just disappearing away. But yeah, let's taste this and see what it's all about. This is the Triple Foo, a West Coast triple IPA coming in at 10.5% ABV from North Park Beer Company in North Park, San Diego in California over in the US. I was really looking forward to this one since I bought it, which was only a couple of days ago. Let's get stuck in. Slàinte, skål, cheers. Ooh. I'm going to say straight away, that's very, very nice. I'm waiting to see if the bitterness in this beer is going to build a little bit, because it's in this one has it has the malty character in this, and some of the fruitiness you get is really properly old school. Like, it has that proper old school flavor profile that I would want from this style. And I would say that what I was talking about earlier, the fact that I thought this beer was going to be a more biscuity, bready sort of West Coast IPA, I was correct in that kind of prediction. Absolutely. This beer, it does build a wee bit of bitterness into the aftertaste, but it's certainly not going to blow the head off you in terms of bitterness in comparison to some other examples of this style that I've had in the past. But still very, very good. Actually, I really do like how this pieces together. So I'm going to say straight away, a big thumbs up to North Point Beer Company for this. I'd be curious to know whether this is a kind of amped up version of, what was it called? The Foo, the original one that was very highly decorated. I wonder if that is what this beer is. It's just been kind of updated and modernized a little bit. But one of the reasons, one of the other things with this beer might be that this has a more modern hop in it, like Strata, so it's not the kind of proper old school thing. And this is an interesting point of innovation with West Coast IPAs. The newer hops coming in from New Zealand and the other ones in America as well, they offer a different perspective on West Coast IPAs that we weren't used to back in the day, because the fruitiness is just completely different. But beautiful West Coast IPA, this one. I'm going to enjoy this, I'll say that straight away. And yeah, if you take a sort of bigger gulp of this one, you do get a bit more bitterness and things out of it, but it's actually quite a sweet, oily, as I say, biscuity and bready West Coast IPA, this one, no doubt in my mind about that. But let's do as we always do. We'll break it down, we'll describe the flavour a bit more in depth, and we'll just go through it. But it's really good, this one. Awesome stuff. Middle third of your palate then. The backbone of the beer, you've got that lovely fresh kind of brown bready bread crust there. As you move further forward in that middle third of your palate, you get a little touch of woodiness there, maybe a wee bit of cracker as well. Then above all of this, you get a more dense and sweet brown bready layer coming out of this one. So yeah, lovely, sweet brown bready layer coming out of this beer. And that lingers into the aftertaste too. The sweetness that you get out of this one is very, very nice. So yeah, sweet brown bready layer. And then above that, you get a more kind of dense white bready layer coming out of it. I do think there's two row of some description in this beer. As I say, the American two rows are always a bit more oily and sweet in their bready character in comparison with, say, for example, German Crystal. So yeah, wee bit of that going on in there. That white bready, the brown bread, then the white bread. But then above that, you start to get some of the more kind of brown sugary aspects of this beer. So yeah, if you go, there's a few layers to it, so you can feel there's like a biscuity, McVitie's digestive biscuit sort of layer in this one. So yeah, McVitie's digestive biscuity layer. If you go to the dead centre of that middle third of your palate, you have this really concentrated, boozy, sweet caramelly sort of thing. As you move out from that, there's a little bit of a kind of Werther's Original butter candy butterscotch. Then you start to get the McVitie's digestive biscuity notes toward the edge of the palate there, and all of that, I think, goes together very, very nicely. Yeah, to be honest, at that, I think that covers everything we need to say about the middle third of your palate in this beer. It's actually quite straightforward, but I think it's just really nicely done. So let's go to the back third of the palate, and as I've often said, the back third of your palate will give you similar flavours to the middle third of your palate, just at different intensities, but they'll be a bit drier and things like that. So the border region between middle and back third of your palate, you've got a wee bit of kind of brown bread in the base, a little bit of white bread on top, and then the base of that back third of your palate, you've got that kind of sweet brown bready hedgehog roll bread crust in there. On top of that, a little bit of cracker. Then you've got that sweet brown bready layer, which feels a little bit lighter and taller and more airy, and just a little touch drier. Then you've got the white bready layer, which sits on top of that, which is really nice as well. And then above the white bready layer, you can feel a wee bit of the drier side of the biscuity side of this beer just kind of creeping over the top. And then above everything else on the back third of the palate, you have more of that kind of yeasty side of the beer. So let's focus on the yeasty side of things for the moment. So the yeasty side of this beer is quite interesting too, because in the centre it has that really dense, sweet, brown bready character, and as you move further out from it, it becomes gradually more like a kind of grainy, woody, rusticy white bread, and then it's just got a bit of that kind of fresh hedgehog roll type thing around the outside of it. So yeah, the way all of that pieces together is really quite interesting. So as I say, it gets a big it does get a big thumbs up from me in that regard. But definitely on the back third of your palate, you can feel that the flavour is taller. Then as you move further forward into the middle third of your palate, it just kind of condenses down and squashes together that little bit more. So the malty and yeasty side of this West Coast IPA is quite nice, and it does remind me of that more kind of like Pliny the Elder type West Coast IPA, that more bready, biscuity example, but it's quite an oily beer, this one, which you would kind of expect when it's a 10.5% triple West Coast IPA. So bear that in mind. Let's move on to the hoppy side of things then. Green component first, of course. So, as I say, Columbus, is it Columbus or the, yeah, Columbus is the one that's been cryoed in this beer. And that's the first example I think I've seen of Columbus cryo, now that I think about it. But yeah, the green component in this beer has the kind of flavour profile you'd expect, but it's just, it feels a bit different because of the presence of the cryo. In the back corners of the palate, You've got a nice little bit of earthiness in there. And yeah, as you move further forward along the sides of your palate, you get a little bit of earthiness, a little bit of herbal character, but you can feel that it gradually becomes more and more sort of floral and slightly spicy as you push further forward along the sides of the palate. But as I say, you've got this characteristic oiliness in the beer because of the presence of the cryo. And the spiciness, the floral spiciness you're going to get is coming from the Columbus. And you know, the Chinook is going to give you a bit more of the kind of piney resin in this beer. And those are the two that are the most likely candidates for the early edition hops, to be honest with you. But round the front curve of the tongue, it's a little bit lighter and more grassy, and has a wee touch of zestiness to it. And yeah, I think this beer does build a little bit of IBU. It does give you a bit more bitterness into the aftertaste. So yeah, on the front third of your palate then, and the hoppy, the fruity side of the hoppiness, I should say. Let's look at that. So the border region between front third and middle third of your palate, you've got a nice little bit of brown bread in the base, a bit of white bread on the top, and the base of that front third of your palate, you've got a nice little bit of fresh white bready bread crust in there, bit of brown bread on top, white bread, and then you've got that nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. So for me, the fruity side of this beer, I think, is really, really quite nice. And it's, when I know these hops quite well, I'm not surprised by it, but I do like it. And if you go to the back of that front third of your palate, then you do get a little hint of that quite strong and quite pungent grapefruit. Chinook is going to give you a little bit of that. Citra is going to give you a little bit of that. But as you move further forward, you get a nice oily kind of passion fruity note. There's a more juicy mango as you move further forward, and as you reach the middle of that, front third of your palate, you get a wee bit of a kind of like drier apricot or something underneath, and a wee bit of a more oily pineapple. But yeah, as you move into the front half of the front third of your tongue, you're getting some really interesting stuff. So you can feel this sort of melony, gooseberry kind of note, which is going to come from strata mainly, but Citra is going to contribute to it as well. And you get a bit of like juicy, oily strawberry. And there is a wee bit of orange, and this is the thing that I don't think the orange is quite as pronounced as I might have thought it was going to be. I mean, this beer has Mosaic and Amarillo in it, and you would expect a wee bit more orange, but it is there into the aftertaste. You do get it, but I think I'm surprised at how prominent the strata is in this beer, to be honest with you. But maybe I found that in a few beers, that maybe it's just my palate. Strata I find is quite a pungent hop in comparison to other ones. Cashmere is another one that I can always just pick out like that. So yeah, just be aware of that. Everyone will have different little nuances that they just pick up on so quickly. One of my friends can always just pick out if a beer has Amarillo in it. So yeah, I think Strata is quite prominent in this one for sure. But yeah, front half of that front third of your palate, it's like melon and gooseberry underneath. A little bit of strawberry as you reach the tip of the tongue, maybe a little bit of a limey zestiness there. But then yeah, juicy orange and oily orange and juicy kind of tangerine sitting on top of that. So interesting from that perspective too. But I think at this point we've covered all the fruity aspects of this beer. And as I've said, overall, it's quite an oily, bready and caramelly biscuit, a sort of West Coast IPA, this one. So yeah, the way this thing goes together, I think, is really, really nice. So big thumbs up to North Park Beer Company for this. This is a really solid West Coast IPA, this one. It's not often I get to try West Coast triple IPAs these days, which is unfortunate because I do love them. But yeah, let's that's everything we need to say about the flavour section. Let's round off this review with a wee look at the mouthfeel. Mouthfeel wise, I would say this beer is probably at the bottom end of the kind of full-bodied part of the spectrum. Carbonation does have a little bit of a prickle to it. It's got a lovely oily, slick kind of mouthfeel, which is what you want from a West Coast IPA, to be honest with you. In terms of IBUs, like I said, this beer is not going to blow the head off you. I mean, it's probably about 50 or 60 IBUs at most. But always take my IBU ratings with a bit of a pinch of salt. This is my weakest point of beer reviewing. I'll say that it's 50 or 60 and it'll be 80 or something. But I feel that this beer is a little bit more of a modern take on the West Coast IPA. I feel it's a bit lower in bitterness. It's not, I'm pretty sure this is not an 80, 90, 100 IBU specimen like we used to get back in the day, but it does build its bitterness a little bit more the more you drink of it. The malty base has a bit of dryness underneath, the smoothness in the middle, bit of sweetness from the bread right enough, and then the more oily brown sugary sweetness on top. Your green component's got piney resin to it, floral spice, and then yeah, you've got these lovely oily fruity characters as well. But overall, it's a really good, you know, really nice oily fruity character that you get out of this, and I do like it. A mix of tropical, the oily kind of melon gooseberry sort of thing, and then a wee bit of orange on top. So yeah, really nicely balanced beer this one certainly makes me curious to try a few more things from this brewery. I'm a sucker for a good West Coast IPA, but I think trying a few other styles from this brewery would be that. And as I say, these guys are only producing like 400,000 litres in comparison to, you know, millions that the other breweries are doing. So this could make for a very out and about, very good out and about video on the channel at some point in the future. I do need to get over to San Diego. So yeah, cool to feature these guys on the channel because they are such a small by volume producer. So yeah, let's leave it at that for this one. This was the Triple Foo, a 10.5% West Coast IPA from the wonderful North Park Beer Company, in San Diego in California. Quite an unusual brewery to be able to feature for you here on the channel, but I hope that you guys enjoyed it nonetheless. I certainly enjoyed filming this review, even though I'm a little bit tired at the point of filming. But yeah, I'm going to go away and enjoy the rest of this. Thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from North Park Beer Company as well. And we will no doubt return to these guys again at some point in the very near future. But until then, Slàinte, skål, cheers, thanks for watching. Check out my social media, check out North Park Beer Company's social media, and I'll see you guys again soon. Slàinte, skål, cheers, ciao just now.